All right, welcome into One of One Sports. Today we're going to be doing a college football week one predictions. So let's get right into it. So first up, we're going to have some notable games that I'm not going to do a game breakdown for, as I'm only going to do the top 5 games of this week of games. But starting off, I think on Thursday, North Carolina will defeat Minnesota. I think North Carolina is really underrated this year, at least in the preseason. I think they'll put up a lot of points, probably over 30. And I think their defense is improved, can hold Minnesota to probably around 20 points. And I think it's a double-digit win for North Carolina. Then I think Colorado will defeat North Dakota State. I think Colorado will put up points in this game and will have the talent edge. North Dakota State, obviously, very dangerous FCS school, win a lot of titles. I would probably say it's about a 10-point victory for Colorado would be what I would pick if I had to choose. Next up, I got TCU defeating Stanford, and I'm actually switching this pick. When I did my full game-by-game picks for every team, I picked Stanford to win this game because it's on Friday at home. But looking into it, I think TCU is just a bit too talented, and Stanford hasn't improved enough that I think TCU wins a close game. I'd say like a 3-point win for TCU. And then I got Florida State bouncing back after their week 0 loss to Georgia Tech. And I think they win probably a 10 to 14 point game over Boston College, who I think with Castellanos and will have pretty good offense and run game that I think can do some good things against a Florida State run defense, I should say, that really struggled against Georgia Tech. But I think Florida State is still a very good team. I think Georgia Tech is also good, and it was a week 0 game. I think Florida State will bounce back and get a win here. All right, so moving on to our first week 1 game, we're going to have the 9 a.m. kick, or for me it's 9 a.m., for most of you it's probably noon kick, but I'm on the West Coast, between Clemson and Georgia. So let's get into the keys to this game. So I think the biggest key to this game is going to be Cade Klubnik improvement. If Clemson's going to have a chance, because I do think, like, you look at 24/7 Sports talent composite, Georgia's ranked 2nd most talented roster, Clemson's ranked 5th. So there's not that huge of a gap in talent, but I think if you were to survey the college football landscape as a whole, most people would think Georgia has a significant edge in talent over Clemson because of maybe how Clemson chooses to use the transfer portal or just how they've performed in recent years. But so Cade Klubnik, for example, was once 5-star quarterback prospect, really highly touted guy, and so far he hasn't looked like that. Like, I think people expected him to fall in the Trevor Lawrence, the Deshaun Watson, maybe not quite as good as those guys, because that's a really high bar, but at least be a really good quarterback. And he had some struggles last year. I'm not saying he's bad, but if Clemson's gonna have a chance against Georgia, he has to take that step into being a star quarterback. And I think he can do it. Not sure if he can do it week 1 against a team as good as Georgia, though. Then I think the Clemson wide receivers, this goes hand in hand. The Clemson's offense really struggled last year, and big part of that, besides Cade Klubnik, was that they didn't have weapons on the perimeter to challenge the top defenses. So I think adding Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore as 5-star true freshman receivers, and then Antonio Williams back, you got a pretty good tight end as well. I think the weapons definitely improve, but I do think it's kind of set up to keep improving throughout the year. Like week 1, true freshman wide receivers' first games going up against Georgia. I don't know how big of an impact they can have right away. Maybe you see flashes, but I'm not sure it'll be. I don't think Clemson's all going to click week 1, so that could be a problem for them. Then the Georgia D-line. Now, this isn't a question of is Georgia's defensive line going to be any good, but if it's like elite, like some of the Georgia defensive lines in the past, they could completely disrupt Clemson's run game, put pressure on Cade Klubnik, force him to beat them through the air, which he might not be able to do with maybe the weapons aren't there, or maybe he hasn't improved that much. And if Georgia's defensive line is elite, I think it could get kind of ugly for Clemson, especially if their offensive line isn't great, which I think Clemson has a solid offensive line, a little bit above average. I think and Georgia, I think, has a really good defensive line. But if Georgia's is great, then it could be, a big game changer. Or, on the other hand, if Georgia's defensive line takes a step back, isn't what it used to be, and Clemson can kind of run the ball a little bit, and then you start running the ball, you open up some of the passing game. Now Clemson's offense is getting into a rhythm that could lead to Georgia actually struggling in this game. And our final key thing is the Clemson pass defense. Georgia's offense was actually elite last year, I believe top 5 by most statistics. Carson Beck's back. Yes, Brock Bauer leaves, and Robert Thomas was kicked off the team. But you still have great tight ends. You have Lawson Lucky there. You have the Stanford transfer. You have another tight end, forget his name off the top of my head. But 3 really good tight ends. Then you bring in London Humphreys, wide receiver from Vanderbilt. Yes, Vanderbilt's not very good, but he was pretty good. Colby Young from Miami. Dominique Lovett returns. Also should mention you lose Ladd McConkey. But it should still be a really good pass team. And Trevor Etienne can catch a little bit out of the backfield. But Georgia has some weapons. And I think Clemson, I know their defensive line's going to be good with Peter Woods there. The other star defensive lineman there. And linebackers should be pretty good with Woodaz and with Barrett, and then maybe Sammy Brown's contributing right away, maybe not. But I think it's that secondary and the more the pass defense that would be the question for Clemson. And if Georgia's able to exploit that, that would give them a big edge. So, getting into the final prediction, I think looking at all the keys, I think Georgia's going to have the upper hand because, how I mentioned, I'm not sure Clemson's going to be clicking right away. If this game's played maybe week 4, week 3 even, I'd give Clemson a better chance. I think their offense could do a little more, but I think they struggle a little bit offensively, and I've got Georgia winning 27-19, and I think 19 for Clemson would actually be pretty good. 27 would maybe be high. You wouldn't want to allow that, but I think Carson Beck and that passing game is going to do really well, and I think their offensive line's good enough to hold up against Clemson's defensive line, which is the strength of that unit. And I think they maybe get a touchdown late, like maybe Clemson's cut it to like 20-16, and then Georgia tacks on a touchdown in the 4th. But I think Clemson keeps it relatively close, but you can kind of feel Georgia's going to win the game. Just one of those games. All right, so next up, also in the same time slot, Penn State, West Virginia. This is going to be, I should mention the last game, in Atlanta, technically a neutral site game, slightly favors Georgia. West Virginia is at home in this one. So what are the keys to the game? I think the biggest key is West Virginia's defensive line. Penn State's losing their best offensive tackle to the NFL draft, went to the Jets, I believe. But so they still have 2 really good running backs in Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen. But so if they're able to just lean on a West Virginia defensive line that, if recruiting rankings would say, or a lot of people would think, is not as physical as the Big Ten teams with the reputation the Big 12 and the Big Ten have, if West Virginia is able to kind of, fight back against the Penn State offensive line, and Penn State can't just lean on them, then that's going to make Drew Aller have to make plays through the air potentially, maybe force those wide receivers to get separation in a way which they struggled last year. If West Virginia isn't holding up well, and Nick Singleton's getting 7 yards a pop, Kaytron Allen's getting 5, and Penn State's just able to control the ball, run the ball, get a few points, maybe some field goals, maybe a touchdown, and then the defense is able to limit West Virginia, it could just be a game that West Virginia is out-physicaled by Penn State. Second key, Garrett Green playmaking. I think West Virginia is a team this year that's going to lean a lot on the run game, with Donaldson there, is a really good running back. But against Penn State, who has a really good defensive line and good linebackers, I don't think they're able to just run the ball. So I think Garrett Green's going to have to make plays, not only throwing the ball, because Penn State has a good secondary too, but escaping pressure with Denny Sutton and Abdul Carter off the edge, picking up a couple first downs with his legs. I think he's going to have to have a really good game to give West Virginia a shot at putting up some points on a Penn State defense that I think is probably a top 10 unit in the country and has a chance to be the best. Third key, Drew Aller improvement. Like I was saying, I don't think this will be as important as it will later in the year, but still important because there's a chance that the run game's not there, and he'll have to find a guy like Caden Saunders, Theo Johnson, Julian Fleming coming in from Ohio State. Maybe fit in a tight window. It won't be all screen passes. He might have to hit a deep shot, hit a guy over the middle of the field. Things he wasn't doing against Michigan and Ohio State last year, who are the top teams. Can he do it against West Virginia? If he's called upon to do it, that's a key to the game. Final key, Penn State wide receivers, right in hand with the last one. If Drew Aller is making the plays or is ready to make the plays, but the receivers just can't get open or they're dropping passes, it'll still be a problem. The receivers got to step up to allow Drew Aller to show his improvement. So now, final prediction. I think at the end of the day, Penn State's going to be a little too good on that offensive line, lean on West Virginia a little bit, and then I don't think Garrett Green's going to make enough plays on this Penn State defense that'll be elite. I think the run game will be stifled for the most part, and I think West Virginia not going to put up a lot of points. I got Penn State 24-14 winning in Morgantown. Next game, we got big rivalry between the Miami Hurricanes and the Florida Gators in Gainesville. 12:30, so it's going to be really, really hot. So keys to the game, I think the Miami team chemistry is one of the most important things here. Miami's bringing in Cam Ward. You're bringing in Damian Martinez. You're bringing in Samuel Brown. That's just on offense. On defense, you bring in a guy like Tyler Barron on the edge. How do these guys gel, especially on offense, with Xavier Restrepo, Elijah Arroyo, Jacoby George? Does it all just fit week one, or does it take some time? If it's clicking week one, like I think Miami's an elite team right away then, but there's a chance that it takes some time and they're vulnerable in week one. Second, I think the line of scrimmage matchup. Both teams I think should have really good offensive lines. Miami's a little better, but I'm not sure I trust Florida's defensive line. So I think Miami's going to have Ruben Bain, Tyler Barron on the edge, which even against Florida's offensive line, which I think is good, is going to be getting to the quarterback, going to be disrupting Florida's offense in a way that I don't think Florida's defensive line will do against a Miami offensive line that has guys like Mauigoa and Jalen Rivers and Okanala if he's playing. And I think Miami, I believe, will establish the run game with Damian Martinez in a way I don't think Florida will, which will open other things up. I think evaluating the line of scrimmage. But if I'm wrong about that, and Miami's not getting to the quarterback, or their offensive line's not as good as it's supposed to be, and Florida wins that line of scrimmage battle, this could all flip. Then the Florida vertical passing game, and this is only a key if I'm right about the line of scrimmage. I think Florida's offensive line won't really establish a good, I don't think it'll be like, oh, Florida can't run the ball at all, I should say. But I also don't think it'll be like, oh, Florida can just run the ball. I think they're going to have to take some shots down the field against a Miami secondary that is inexperienced, talented, but inexperienced. And I think they'll have to make some plays that way if they're going to put up a significant amount of points. So I think that's a key for them. And then finally, Cam Ward playmaking. I think you bring in a guy like Cam Ward because he's dynamic running the ball, he's dynamic throwing the ball, true Heisman level contender, and you want him to show that, right? You want Cam Ward to be like the best quarterback on the field, definitely, but you want him to look like the best player on the field, and you want to feel like, okay, because we have this guy, we have a chance to win every game, and you want him to show that in the opening game of the season. So the final prediction, I mentioned, I think Miami's going to be more physical on the line of scrimmage. I think they've got a quarterback edge. I think they got better weapons on the perimeter, and I think they have the better running back. And overall, I think that leads to putting up a lot of points. But I think Florida keeps it kind of close. Maybe they'll score late. But I think a pretty comfortable 30-21 win for the Miami Hurricanes, starting the season off 1-0 against their rival, the Florida Gators. All right, for our fourth game that we'll be predicting, we have Texas A&M, Notre Dame. This is going to be a night game at Kyle Field. So let's get right into the keys of the game here. I think the biggest key to watch, and maybe out of all the games I mentioned, this is the matchup I'm most focused on, and it's going to be that Notre Dame offensive line going up against a Texas A&M defensive line. Notre Dame, you losing Joe Alt, top 5 pick in the NFL draft. You have talent on the offensive line, but it's inexperienced and it's unproven, therefore, it's kind of redundant. But in a Texas A&M defensive line, you bring in Nick Scourton from Purdue, top edge rusher. Shamar Turner's returning, top level player. Shamar Stewart's back, top level talent. Maybe he hasn't shown it the most in his production, but still the talent's there. And then even the rest of the guys. I mean, Texas A&M is just so talented. They just haven't had the right guy coaching them in Jimbo Fisher. Can Mike Elko be that guy? Especially being defensive minded, he could probably get a lot out of this defensive line group. And then I think the second factor that plays into this as well, Texas A&M home field. I think a night game at Kyle Field, maybe the toughest place to play in college football. Certainly, I would say like top 5 to 10. The Whiteouts up there, probably Death Valley's up there. I'm sure there's other places. But the point is, it's going to be really difficult. It's going to be really loud. So I think when Notre Dame's on offense, how many false starts are we going to get from inexperienced offensive linemen thrown off by how loud it is? How many sacks are they going to allow because of Texas A&M's elite defensive line players? How many tackles for loss? Can they establish a ground game? Is Riley Leonard protected at all, or is he going to have to be moving around? Which leads me into my next key play, Riley Leonard versus Connor Wigman. Because like Riley Leonard, I've kind of talked about it, I think with the lack of proven offensive line play, he might have to become a threat running the ball. He might have to make some pretty incredible plays if they don't have a presence on the O-line. For Connor Wigman, I trust their O-line a little more, but Notre Dame also has a great defense and great defensive line. Benjamin Morrison, Xavier Watts, Howard Cross, all there. And it's a defense that, like Penn State, has the potential to be the best in the country, and I think probably a top 10 unit. So, and they're experienced too. But so for Texas A&M, and I'll just do this last key at the same time, with their skill position players and Connor Wigman, can they get separation on these top cornerbacks or safeties? Can they run the ball on a top defensive lineman? Can Connor Wigman, he's obviously very talented, can he make the big plays against this Notre Dame defense? So, making the final prediction, I think it's a low-scoring game. I think Notre Dame really struggles offensively because of the O-line stuff I mentioned. I think they'll be set. I think they'll get behind the chains a lot in this game. But I think their defense also really good and will hold Texas A&M in check. I don't think they'll do much at all. I think it's a really close game. Comes down to the wire. But I've got Texas A&M winning 17-13. And what I think will be a low-scoring but really fun game to watch. I'm really excited for it. And this is our final Saturday game, but wanted to cover the Sunday game against USC, between USC and LSU. This game's taking place in Las Vegas, so maybe that's an edge for USC, but LSU travels really well, so we'll see about the home field, but just thought I'd mention it. Keys to the game here. First one, I think most important, USC defensive line. LSU could have the best offensive line in the country. If you look at NFL draft boards, both their offensive tackles usually go first round, pretty much anywhere you look, and they should have a really good offensive line. The reports are good about their running backs, but LSU hasn't had great running backs very recently. But I say all this to say that if USC's defensive line isn't physical enough and LSU's just leaning on them, controlling the ball, running it, that's exactly the style of play that you would think USC would struggle with and has struggled with in the past, is that physicality. Now, if Bear Alexander and Anthony Lucas and the other guys on that defensive front push back and, LSU gets some wins on the offensive line, but USC gets some stops as well, and it's pretty even. And now it's, okay, LSU's going to throw the ball a little more, and we get into that shootout style. Then USC, you're playing their game now. So now Miller Moss versus Garrett Nussenmeyer. I do expect this to be a shootout. So I think, and I don't think, let me put the other one up here. Defense, I don't think either defense is going to be very good. I think both will improve because you kind of have to, right? They were just so bad last year. But I don't think either one will be good. I don't even think either one will be average, at least in week one. So I think it's going to be a shootout because I think USC's defensive line will at least limit the run game enough. And it's going to become a passing game. Who's got better weapons? Who's got better quarterback play? Who's going to make a mistake, right? Because I don't think these defenses are getting like, oh, we're stopping you 3 plays in a row type of stops. But it could be Miller Moss makes a bad decision in his second career start, or Garrett Nussmeier forces the ball somewhere it shouldn't go, and all of a sudden you got 2 turnovers, or he fumbles, or he's standing around too long in the pocket, strip sack, and now one of the defense actually makes a big play because of the inexperience at quarterback, and those mistakes in a game that I think is pretty close could be the difference. And then special teams, LSU Brian Kelly, I should say, pretty infamous for how bad his teams have been on special teams to open seasons. And I think this is a game that it could go badly when you have a returner like Zachariah Branch, who's probably the best returner in the country, at least I would expect. He could, LSU could mess up in special teams. He gets a big return, flips the tide of this game. Could definitely happen. Getting to the final prediction, I think this is by far the highest scoring game of the weekend, or that I covered here at least. And I do think it comes down to those key things I mentioned. I think USC limits the run enough, and based on the reports, Garrett Nussmeier's struggle with turnovers in camp. I think he makes 1 or 2 mistakes, at least one more than Miller Moss, that gives USC an advantage there in the turnover battle. And I think Zachariah Branch makes a game-changing play in special teams, enough for me to give USC the win 42-34 over LSU. So that's it for this week 1 predictions. If you guys liked it, you can check out my other college football content on the channel. Feel free to comment what college football videos you want to see this season. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I thank you guys for watching. Bye.